Hello all. So we are going to today talk about technology operating model for enterprise AI adoption. So let me start by introducing my co-presenter Andreas. So Andreas is part of our CTO org, and he has more than 2 decades of experience across North America, Europe, and APAC. And he has done various roles from software engineering to a head of enterprise architecture, and also been part of transformation initiatives across the globe. And he is also an accomplished podcast host and a published author as well.
Thank you, Ahilan. And Ahilan is kind of a match made in heaven. I tell you a funny story. When did anybody watch the Last Dance, the Bulls documentary on Netflix? Very good. Yeah, I watched it about like 10 times, I think. But there's this scene where the coach of this college team basically called the scout and says, "You did not screw this up," right? When he saw Michael Jordan play, right, the first time. And I did the same to my vice president back then, Frank Feldman, when I first met Ahilan, right? So we basically connected from day one, and that's kind of where also the work comes from. And the reason being that we have a very similar background, right? So as you can see, Ahilan and I, we both worked in vendor land, but also in the industry, and I think that's kind of important to get content real and to make it work. And with that, I'll hand over to you again.
Thank you, Andreas. So we would like to start with setting the context on why we chose this topic, right? So from the context perspective, let's first define what an operating model is, because if you ask what is an operating model, you're going to hear 1,000 different perspectives, 1,000 different reasons, or 1,000 different ways for you to represent it, right? So in our term, the way we approach operating model is, it's basically a plan or system that outlines how an organization will function, right? And why it is important? It helps you to define the processes and resources, and also it clearly defines how roles and responsibilities are part of this journey to make an operating model successful. And what does it deliver? It creates an efficient and effective operations for your organization to build and manage and operate any initiative that you have. Okay?
Can I just ask who has heard the term operating model before, and who has actually developed one in their organization? Oh, very good. We need to talk. Very good. Okay, awesome. So everybody has one, right? Everybody's got an operating model, but you either have it naturally or organically, or you basically make a conscious effort to define how that all works together. And I think this is a great umbrella kind of topic to kick off, right? Because everything we learn and hear about today are bits and pieces that you could basically match together in your operating model, and then think of all the stakeholders.
Thank you, Andreas. So why is it important now? So let's talk about what is happening in the AI landscape, right? So the democratization of AI has happened in the last 3 years. So if you ask most of our customers or most of the organization, when we call AI, it mostly refers to generative AI. So close to 100% of the customers or 100% of the organizations are already looking at doing something with the AI in the next 5 years. There are a lot of surveys about it. This survey is from Deloitte. It actually highlights more than 90% of the enterprises are already working on doing something in AI in the next 5 years, right? And then, in order for us to maximize the success of AI, we also see a lot of customers talking about hybrid cloud. Because in order for them to maximize the impact of AI across edge, their core data center, and the cloud, they are looking at building a hybrid cloud architecture so that they can benefit from all these 3 landing zones in the cloud native ecosystem. Then there is also the new discussion around shadow AI. So you can think of shadow AI as shadow IT on steroids, right? Because it's coming fast, nobody has paid attention to it yet, but the impact and the risks that it poses is actually significantly higher than what shadow IT ever did. And then there is also concerns on AI sprawl, because the pace at which the AI ecosystem is evolving, it is growing to bring in more and more technology. And also thanks to the vibe coding culture and also the code assistant landscape, you are going to start incorporating more and more technologies that is going to increase the technology debt as well. And the last but not the least, it is very difficult to hire and retain AI talent. And we see it across the board It is not only difficult to hire a talent, but also keeping them engaged, keeping them motivated, and retaining them for longer is already a challenge for major enterprises. Anything else to add, Andreas?
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, thank you. So how do we see this playing out, right? How do we see successful organizations making their AI journey a success? That's where actually platform engineering comes in play. So why is platform engineering important for AI adoption? Because it gives a single point of access for all tools, be it AI, be it application development and delivery. Now it provides a single place or a single source of truth for all the initiatives. And it also provides a guardrails for security and compliance. It is very, very important to address the shadow AI threat that I talked about before. Then it also provides you with the capabilities to observe and enforce policy across the plane, and also identify some risky behavior, either using unauthorized tools or using certain models and capabilities that are not certified for organizational use, right? And then when you operate the platform as a product, you bring in additional capabilities as well. So it is easy for organizations to build a platform that addresses the current needs of what the AI environment or the ecosystem requires, but you are also looking at a field that is evolving significantly faster. So by bringing in product mindset, you are building a platform that is going to address your current needs, as well as going to address the needs of the future and make the platform more flexible and scalable as well. And also, you are going to drive adoption, because when you have a product mindset, you are also have a vested interest in the success of the platform. So you're going to have proactive reach out, proactive enablement, and a community around it to make sure the platform that you built is properly used, and the consumer or the tenant experience on the platform is significantly better as well, and it is progressively improving, right? So how does technology operating model fit in? So we talked about the surge of AI, and it is coming, the risks of shadow AI, and how platform engineering can help you address it, and why technology operating model to it, right? So there are three key reasons for it. One thing is it's going to bring all key stakeholders together, right? So if you look at the IT landscape, be it cloud native or even before the cloud migration of workloads, most of them are IT initiated. However, AI initiatives are mostly driven by business, right? IT is playing a support role. So how do you bring all the stakeholders together? Now you need a better approach, a more inclusive approach, and a different approach altogether. And by following a technology operating model, you will be able to bring the stakeholders together, right? And that improves the collaboration, participation, and alignment. And best of all, it minimizes the impact of HIPPO. You may not be able to nullify it, but at least you will be able to minimize the impact of highest paid person opinion, which is always an issue with driving new changes or new transformation in an enterprise. And then it's always going to be goals and outcomes aligned. So it's going to help you clearly define why, what, how, and most importantly, when. It is very easy to allocate a significant budget, build a platform, and have no tenant, right? So it has to be paced out, and the when question is something that you will be able to address much better when you have a technology operating model in play. And also, it is going to improve adoption. It is going to help you to measure the adoption and success, and it is going to help you to evolve continuously. That's where the product mindset comes in play as well, right? So at this point, I would invite Andreas to talk about the approach, how we can help you address it.
Thank you, Ahilan. Okay, so everything is open source you see here today, even though you can buy the book, right? It's we have it on GitHub, and all the chapters are summarized there, so feel free to raise issues as well if you find anything that you don't see covered or want to have addressed or see addressed in more detail, then that's the GitHub repo you can go to. So from just to recap what you just heard, right? So we talk about an operating model, a technology operating model in its totality today, but we actually putting an AI and a platform engineering lens on it, right? So that to make it more aligned, because you could go really theoretical on technology operating models, but really to visualize that, it's basically your umbrella kind of concept that brings everything in your organization together. I believe no organization can just copy and paste a technology operating model from another organization, because the line of business is different, the compliance regulations are different, the the team setup, the budgets, everything is different, right? That's why I think that's actually why Hillen and I, when we got together, first thought, right, this from his pivotal days and the industry days that matched the experience pretty much what I came from. And so we thought, while we had that kind of concept in our heads, we wanted to formalize it, and that's kind of what we did. And we also wanted to do an open source approach, and that's why we also focus on the open practice library, which we're gonna go in detail a bit more as well, right? So to set the context, so we had the ideas, as I just said, right? But then we didn't want to make it on a Hillen and Andreas show, really, right? So we wanted to also validate it with industry players and kind of get real honest feedback. And we were very lucky because we found a whole heap of contacts in the ANZ and global community, really, that have delivered major projects and we valued very well. And we also knew they wouldn't hold back on feedback, right? That's very important as well. And I had some rough conversations in coffee shops, I can tell you that, right? But it's all for the greater good. So the kind of people you see on this screen is now, they have a huge experience in terms of delivering real life projects and transformation programs. There's Catherine, ex-NASDAQ, ex-Macquarie Bank, Culture Amp, NBN. There's Guillaume, who is the head of product engineering at Optus, right? And now he's at ResMed. And he just took a sabbatical, right? He just took a year off, went to France, where he's originally from, and started his startup, right? Travel pouch with a kangaroo logo, and just, went deep on code again. And I think that's kind of important, right? To connect the theoretical concepts with real life coding experience and product development. And then we have, Woolies in there, KPMG. Like, really, we wanted to compile our approach and validate it with real industry players, as I said. And then, who was here last year? Who saw Mirko Herring's keynote? Thank you. So he was here last year, right? He did the keynote, and I value him very, very well. He also wrote a great book on DevOps. And so we gave them the nearly accomplished work, or the finished product to Mirko to review. And then along the way, we also met people like Nathan Chopra, who is the Chief Digital Officer and Chief Information Officer at Indigo Airlines. Indigo Airlines is the largest passenger airline in India, so they transport more passengers like Air India itself. And he's got great experience across the Middle East as well. And then our Chief Technology Officer, Vincent Caldera, actually. And all that, right, what we're talking about today is really a compilation of those people and validating our approach with their feedback. So now, the concepts you're going to hear about or see in the demo are the operating model, and if you go bottom up, it's like dimensional items. This is really where the rubber hits the road, where you define your iterations and how you develop that. And again, because every organization is different, the starting point for every organization will be different as well, right? And then we roll those dimensional items up in the operating model dimensions itself, and then streams. And streams that we found working really well is like leadership and architecture, platform and tenant experience, and applications and workloads, or services, whatever the terminology is that you use in your organization. You don't need to use those streams, so everything is customizable. But this is a template that we created at the GitHub repo that you can download for free and start working and experimenting with that. So the process you usually go through developing your operating model is like you define your streams, as I just said, right? The three come out of the box. Then you would manage your stakeholders, or make a conscious effort to basically being aware of what's going on in the organization. Who are the stakeholders? Who are the external customers, right? Who are the internal customers for your platform? Who are the developers, right? Who are the tenants on your platform? Because as Hillen just said, you just don't want to like build and then pray they come. So you need to make sure whatever you build is fit for purpose. Then you select the dimensions, you scope your dimensions, you detail then the line items and the iterations that you need to develop to get a progressing mindset and an iterative mindset, and it's also important that you show progress from a enterprise program perspective, right? And then you just review and iterate. And a technology operating model is nothing that you just develop once and then you leave it. It's kind of, it should be part of the water cooler conversation that you really have on a daily basis, right? So that's the overarching approach in terms of what the items are. And so all this, the secret sauce or the not so secret sauce, because it's all open source, is the open practice library. Sorry? Did I hear bite-sized architecture? Oh, very good. You hear more about the open practice library also from other speakers today. I have the feeling. Thank you, Andrea. And so the point here is that it's a people's thing, right? So it's a team. It's an organizational approach, and it's very similar to open source. And if you read research from Ron Westrum, for example, anybody has heard of Ron Westrum, Dr. Ron Westrum? So he's basically done some awesome research on high-performance cultures, right? And how do you actually create a high-performing team or a high-performing organization? And the traits that he's encountered are the same traits as the open source community already embodies on a daily basis. It's open information available, high collaboration, and the ultimate goal is more important than egos or titles or positions in an organization, right? And that is what all those practices in the open practice library embody. So in some examples that I brought, if I find the right button, is so there are like, I don't know how many there are now, 20, 30, 40 practices. And this is just an example of when you download that slide deck later, you can click on them and see the different practices. So very important icebreakers. Some people think like, oh yeah, we don't have much time, let's just skip the icebreaker. Don't ever skip the icebreaker, because this is kind of where in only 15, 20 minutes the magic happens, because people bond, people get to know each other, and that then enables the conversations and the knowledge sharing that you will witness in those subsequent sessions and workshops. And some magic I just witnessed less than 12 months ago. I was in a country, and I had the two major competing airlines in the same room workshopping together what the future of aviation looks like in the country, right? Without that concept, that would have never happened. So that's pretty impressive, I find. And then, impact mapping is about stakeholders and the change you need to accomplish with those stakeholders. Dot voting is something that Hillan already mentioned, is like removing the hippo. And we're not saying it's not important, right, to have someone who is responsible and accountable having an opinion. But what we're saying is that dot voting allows you to equalize the voices, right? So across the organization. Then value slicing helps you to define what the different iterations provide in terms of business value, and user story mapping, anyway, right? Okay, so that's kind of an example of the proven open practice libraries that we use as part of our Open Innovation Labs methodology that we use worldwide. And in the middle you see the Mobius loop, where you basically picture the continuous and the iterative nature of that approach, right? So it's never done and dusted, it's always the water cooler conversation, as I said. And yeah, that's the approach. Yeah. Now let's make it real in platform engineering, Hillan.
Yeah, thank you, Andreas. So before we actually show you the template and demo, we want to kind of show you a couple of examples, right? So let's take an example of platform engineering adoption, right, using the technology operating model. So like Andreas mentioned, there are three foundational aspects in the technology operating model approach we discuss. The first one is the streams, that's at the higher level. Second one is dimensions, and then inside the dimensions you have a lot of dimension items. So what you see here is actually a definition of streams and dimensions. So for example, you can see that I have highlighted 3 dimensions here under platform engineering. So when we talk about platform engineering, the 3 dimensions that comes often are, how is it going to be funded, right? Are you going to be having a centralized LOB or centralized funding model, or it is going to be funded by different business units, right? Or it's a hybrid approach where you have the foundation built globally in a centralized manner, and then the other business units who are going to use, or LOBs who are going to use, contribute something for the usage. And how are you going to show the ROI, or how are you going to show the utilization? There are two models for that as well. So one is either you're going to use a chargeback mechanism, or going based on the consumption and adoption, you're going to charge the business units or your tenants, or you're going to go with a showback mechanism in case where you already have a centralized budgeting model already implemented, right? So similarly for metrics, are you going to, what are the metrics you're going to gather? When you're talking about platform engineering, it's all about experience, and it's all about the adoption. So how are you going to measure that, right? It is about how do you measure tenant experience. Productivity is a word I try to avoid, because productivity means different things. However, in the context of platform engineering, one of the biggest selling feature is we are going to make developers more productive, right? So I have added that as well there. And then how are we going to measure adoption and usage? These are all under the metrics. And when it comes to feedback loops, which is actually, if you take one thing away from making platform engineering more successful, it is all about feedback loops, right? How are you going to reach out to your tenants on their perception, their adoption, their challenges on using the platform, and how are you going to use that data to continuously improve your platform so that the experience and the challenges they have are already addressed, and they are having better and better experience using your platform. At the end of the day, the best marketing you can get for your platform is for your tenant to bring in more tenants. And in order for you to do that, you need to make sure that they have a better experience, right? So similarly, we are going to the next aspect of our discussion, which is AI adoption. That's the hot topic now. So for AI adoption, how do you see your streams and dimensions aligned? And for this example, I would go into the platform and tenant experience stream. So the three corners or three key things under the platform and tenant experience are platform, how do you onboard your tenants, and how you operate the platform, right? So it is about building the platform, operating the platform, and how you are going to onboard the tenants, because the platform needs to be consumed. So some of the key things here are, how are you going to bring your operations automation, which we call it as ML ops on the AI platform. Then how are you going to make sure that your platform is kind of fully compliant with your industry and organizational regulations, and it is not biased on, or it also has a drift detection mechanism baked in. And when it comes to onboarding, if you are using platform engineering, it's all about self-service and also continuous enablement and community mindset, right? In order for you to make sure the experience is elevated and your tenants are actually your marketing arm, bringing in more tenants to the platform. Then from the operations perspective, it is all about resiliency, making it elastic so that it can extend across the hybrid cloud. We talked about, in order for you to maximize your AI establishment or AI initiatives, it has to be across your edge, core, and cloud for most enterprises. So it has to be elastic, and it has to be hybrid in nature, and it has to be tenant centric. At the end of the day, the platform is all about tenant experience, right? So this is how you can see, depending on your initiative, how you have your streams defined and then the dimensions identified, and we will be covering 2 of those use cases in our demo now. Okay. So now it's time for demo. Let's go.
Yeah. So thank you, Helen. And so what you've just seen here is examples, right? It doesn't mean that you need to take those dimensions and those streams, as I said earlier, but it's important to have those conversations, right? And then drop it if it's not relevant for your organization. As we said, no 2 operating models are the same, right? So this is now what you get from that GitHub repo that I shared earlier with you. This is about metrics and measuring progress. And even though your target state will always potentially be a moving target, right? You will be never done. And even if you reach the target state that you defined in 2020, the target state in 2025 might look very different, right? And have progress. So this is kind of a template that allows you to roll all that work up. I showed you the concepts earlier on this slide deck, right? Where we roll up the dimensional items, the dimensions, the streams in the operating model, and that's kind of the implementation of that. So here we have defined those different streams, and we also have a definition of done, for example, right? Not yet started, discussed, agreed, and designed, as you can see down here, right? In use and done. And then we dive now into those streams. So this is the overarching operating model dashboard. So now in the leadership and architecture dashboard, this example has decided that we look at customers, at partners and competitors, at architecture, at data, culture, security, compliance, talent strategy, and metrics, right? So that's kind of all those dimensions in the leadership and architecture stream. And then you have those different items here. You define what that really is and why it's relevant to business and to the purpose of the organization. And then you can define the overall completion, but you don't define that at that level. You actually dive a bit deeper, and Ahilan's going to go through the details in a bit. And then stream 2 is the same, right? It's the same structure as I said earlier, right? See, they are totally different dimensions now, like platform and onboarding and lifecycle management. And then down at the application and workloads level or services level, whatever the terminology is, then this example has selected those dimensions, like developer experience, inner loop, outer loop, workload portability, core to edge, if that's relevant for your organization. Okay? So this is the overarching structure, and now Ahilan's going to walk you through some examples to make this better come to life for you. Okay?
Thank you, Andreas. So you might be wondering, how do I even build this, right? That's following the open practice library practices. So there are a lot of different exercises that you go through. You work with different stakeholders, sometimes together, sometimes individual as teams, and make this happen, right?
Yes,
Another thing.
Sorry, one more thing on that, right? So if you do a lot of brainstorming, for example, you also need to think as a facilitator, do I want to converge or do I want to diverge, right? From an ideation perspective. So what's the difference? If I need many different ideas because I want a blank screen and a blank piece of paper, then you basically have a ideation first and then you talk about it, right? But if you want to converge the ideas, you do the opposite. You first have a conversation in the room so that people kind of align on ideas, and then you go into the one by one or in the team exercise, right? Does that make sense? So this is kind of where there's a lot of nuances, right? I mean, we give you the catalog of those open practice libraries, but then how you actually apply it has more nuances to it, right?
Thank you. And another thing I would like to highlight here is it has a decay factor as well. So I always call this as enrichment. So why it is enrichment is it starts decaying as soon as you finish it. So it's very important for you to keep it current. Like Andreas highlighted, it has to be part of your culture. It has to be part of an evolving mindset, if you will. Otherwise, what you build as an operating model, you don't touch it for 6 months, it's not relevant anymore. So we always have a shelf life and an enrichment concept. If you don't revisit your operating model based on your organizational structure and the way you operate, anywhere between 3 to 6 months, it is extinct at that point, right? So let's focus now on the building blocks. I call this as the Lego bricks, which is basically the dimension items. So for this example, I'm going to walk through one dimension item called AI safety. We are now in the AI adoption use case, and the dimension we are focusing on is customer. So when it comes to AI safety for customer, how do I roll it out, right? What are the Lego bricks I will build for that? So there, you are going to see that there are some dependencies already. So that means this AI safety is dependent on different dimensions and different dimensional items across my operating model. And you see that I already highlighted it is already dependent on data model training, which is part of the leadership and architecture stream, and data dimension. Similarly, there are other dependencies as well. And you always need to understand where you are starting at. What is your current state, right? So the idea here is you need to know the start state, you need to know the target state, and you need to create multiple transition states in order for you to reach the target state, right? The example I will always go to new customers or new practitioners is, think of it as running a marathon, right? You want to run a marathon? Yes, everybody can run a marathon without training, but whether you will recover the next day or you're going to be bedridden for 2 months is where the difference is, right? So how do you do that? You're going to build towards the target state. So all the transition states are, maybe you are running a 10K first, then you are preparing for a half marathon, doing your weekend long run for 5 months before you run a marathon, right? So that's how you can think of it, these as transition states being. So for this example, we're going to see that I have defined 5 different transition states. The first transition state is, as part of the AI adoption, we are going to make sure that the customers are aware that there are certain modules in the application that are going to use AI, and we are also going to slowly start highlighting that this particular response is actually delivered by an AI LLM behind the scenes. So that is the second transition state, right? And then we also want to have a process as part of this journey to take customer feedback and incorporate customer experience as part of the AI journey. Because we now rolled out some AI capabilities. We have made sure the customers are aware that this particular capability is provided by AI engine. And now, as a third transition state, we want to be able to capture the feedback from the customer and use that feedback to improve our AI, right? And then the fourth is I am also going to implement a bias and hallucination identification or drift detection mechanism to make sure the platform is capable of identifying risk early, and in some cases address that as early as well, right? Report always, address as much as possible, right? So these are the 4 transition states that are defined as part of this dimension item. And you need not have all the 5 states defined. The recommendation is to at least think of it as 5 transition states. For some items, for this example, you can see that we have only defined 4 transition states, right? And the target state, which is our marathon goal, is our standardized and proactive, collaborative and automated AI implementation that has bias, hallucination as well as drift detection identified as at the platform level. So if you look at most of the AI initiatives, that's going to be the target state. How do we achieve the target state? We need to know where we are at, and we need to define transition states that are achievable, that are measurable, and that actually leads into the target state incrementally, right? So one other example I would like to show here is actually for the platform engineering or under the platform capability. And what we would like to here focus on here is the platform capability on the architecture, right, on the hardware architecture. So let us focus on what type of infrastructure is required in this initiative of using platform engineering mindset to drive AI adoption. So the dimension item here is multi-accelerator and processor type support, and the same concept applies here. So you can first define the start state to understand where you are in the journey, and then you define target state, which is basically a fully implemented end goal that you would like to achieve, which is basically implementing a cost effective and a vendor neutral AI platform that supports multiple type of accelerators across NVIDIA, AMD, maybe Intel, and also it supports both CPU and GPUs, right? This is my target state, right? It's maybe my 2 years or 3 years out target state. And how do I achieve it? I take bite-size approach. I start with a platform that is completely built on one type of accelerator. We start with, let's say, NVIDIA A100s in this case, and then slowly start deploying applications to realize value on the platform, then extend the architecture to support multiple different accelerators as maybe iteration 3 of a transition state, then build it to support multiple different types of processors, right, CPU and GPU. So now you get an idea, right? So these are the building blocks. So why it is building blocks is that can be assembled together based on the different dependencies to achieve the target state I have in mind. So at this point, given that we have talked about the approach of technology operating model, the key constructs in technology operating model, and how do we build it, I will call Andreas to close out the session for us, right?
Thank you, Hilan.
Oh, I closed it.
You just closed the slide?
Yeah.
No one noticed, don't worry.
Yeah, I can go there.
Okay, so to closing out, this was a bit of a whirlwind tour, right? But we really wanted to make sure that we cover the sort of approach how every little technology advancement that you want to implement in your organization is actually connected to the larger ecosystem in your organization. And as I said, we'd be very happy to get your feedback, get pull requests on the Git repo. And we also brought a little thank you with us. So Hilan and I just published our patterns for AI adoption microbook. And it's really the patterns, they look at different levels, at organizational kind of AI adoption, but also looking at data architectures, at model development and the operationalization concerns, right? How do you operationalize, industrialize AI in your organization? You all get a free download for that. You go to the Section 6 booth, you just scan the QR code, and the book is yours. And with that, thank you for being here, for not leaving the room, and I'm looking forward to your feedback, okay? Thank you very much.
Thank you all.